Seems like a big group today. Great to see everyone. Great to see Matt. And also especially good to see Sue with us. Okay, we're going to unfortunately do a repeat. I hope it's one you'll enjoy, though I looked on my notes and I haven't used this one since 2014. So hopefully you won't remember it. I might have used bits of it since then. Unfortunately, I have to do it this way to be able to do something. Gary preached last week, so I couldn't really ask him to do it today, so this was the best alternative. Okay, the lesson's called Learning to Fly. I'm going to look at a few verses, culminating in a verse that talks about Christians being able to fly, and then we'll have a bit of a look at what that possibly means. Matthew 11:29, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That seems to be describing the life of the Christian, at least what the Christian's life should be like. We can put our burdens, our problems, our difficulties on Jesus, and he will support them for us. It says, "Take my yoke upon you." There's two possible types of yokes that it's talking about. One is the yoke where you have between two animals. And when you put two animals together, they can drag a huge amount of weight. So one possibility is the yoke is between us and Jesus, where in this case Jesus is carrying most of the weight. But there's another type of yoke, and this is the one I tend to favour, which was built like an A-frame. And you actually get inside this A-frame and you are able to carry the entire weight on your whole body. And you can actually carry quite a considerable amount of weight with one of those A-frames. I think that's the idea. That's the yoke which Jesus gives us. He gives us something that enables us to carry considerably more weight than we would normally be able to do. Then you've got John 10:10, "The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and they may have it more abundantly." Just saying the abundant life indicates we're going to have something more than other people have got. And I believe as Christians that's very true. Jesus came to give us and give our life something more than we could have without him. Then Isaiah chapter 40. "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Okay, sorry. My mind's not working at the moment. That's why I'm doing a repeat. "They shall mount up with wings like eagles." You know, the picture of the flight of an eagle is something really, really impressive. They've got large wingspan. They're supremely powerful birds, really graceful in their flight. And yet, Isaiah here, as part of a prophecy, likened the life of a person who is a follower of God, whether a Jew or a Christian. For us, it's a Christian. He compared that to the flight of an eagle. And you probably maybe never thought of your life in that way, but that's the way Isaiah describes it here. And then he says, "You will run and not weary, you shall walk and not faint." You know, that's a beautiful picture of what's possible for the Christian. As I thought about this, and I kind of developed this sermon quite a long time ago, I looked around and to be honest, I could see that not many people's lives could be, Christians' lives rather, could be described in this way. A lot of them seem to have just as many struggles as those outside the church had. So then I started thinking about how might we apply what's just been said. One kind of thing I thought about was pie in the sky. It's just fancy talk. Like advertising. You know, you take this pill, you'll have no more pain ever. Simply not going to happen, but it'll sell a lot of pills. You know, if you have this pill or if you buy this vibrating product, you'll lose weight without ever working. You know, the ultimate weight loss, never have to work for it. It's not going to happen, but it sounds good. kind of had to disregard that. I just couldn't see that coming from God. The next possibility I thought of was a carrot on a stick. You know, if you've got a donkey that's not willing to go forward, one method some people used was to stick a carrot on the end of a stick, and you'd hold the carrot just in front of the nose of the donkey. So the donkey would see the carrot thinking, I've just got to take a few steps and I can have a bite of that carrot. But the thing is, when you're on his back, as soon as he takes a few steps, the carrot moves forward the same. So if he keeps wanting to get the carrot, he'll keep moving forward. And maybe that was a possibility for Christians. We're given something that kind of theoretically is possible, and so long as we keep trying to get it, we will make progress. We may never attain it, but we will still make progress. In the end, I could see some merit in that idea, but in the end, I'd had to decide that what is talked about here is actually possible. God does not lie. If he says it's possible, it must be possible. But then that gives you the problems. Why aren't so many Christians' lives, why can't they be described in this way? And I came to the conclusion that there were a number of principles in Christianity that we have to follow if we are to attain what's described here. It won't happen simply by accident or simply because we want it to happen or we believe it's going to happen. There are things we have to actually do or change in our lives to accomplish this. The first one I came up with was, for want of a better term, we should become a problem solver. There was a gentleman called Norman Vincent Peale, real positive thinking author, fairly interesting guy to read. And he said he was in one particular part of New York and he met a guy, I can't remember what his name now, Charlie or something like that. And he said he made the mistake of saying to Charlie, how are you feeling? And unfortunately, Charlie told him how he was feeling. And Charlie said he just felt terrible. He's got all these problems. Everything's gone wrong. His wife doesn't like him anymore. And business isn't going well. And, the car's broken down. And daughter won't do what he tells her to do. And all sorts of problems. And so Norman, being the sort of person he is, he wanted to kind of think, what can I say to encourage this guy? Because he really wasn't in a good state. And so Norman said, the other day I was in a part of town where there are a lot of people, but there is not one single problem. And old Charlie's eyes perked up, and this is the place I want to go. Tell me where it is. And he said, it's West Lawn Cemetery in the Bronx. And he said the lesson he drew from that was the presence of problems constitutes a sign of life. And I think that's very true. The only place we will not have any problems whatsoever is when we're in heaven. Actually, when we're dead, when we're in the grave. I learned an interesting thing in a business class, actually. And it said that the successful business people are the ones who are best at overcoming problems. In other words, problems are just part of life. We have to accept them. So what should be our attitude towards problems? And that's where I'm getting to from a Christian point of view. First verse I want to look at is 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 13. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. In other words, there are no new and unique problems. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. Now, for that to be true, in other words, if God doesn't allow us to experience any temptations, or possibly you could call those problems, that we can't bear, that we can't cope with, and that's what he's promising here. You will not experience anything that you actually cannot cope with. For that to be true, God must be filtering the problems that we face. If he sees a problem going around that requires good eyesight, good eye-hand coordination, fairly high degree of intelligence, he'll say, no, John can't cope with that, give that one to Fred. Something like that must be going on. Because God says here, I will not allow you to experience anything that will overwhelm you. Doesn't mean we'll be able to solve every single problem, but nothing will be able to overwhelm us and prevent us being able to do, what the sort of things we want to do in general. Okay? No temptation is overcoming except such as common to man. Now, another point I think we can make in that first part is, if every problem has already been faced, it's more than likely already been overcome, and you'll be able to find information on how to overcome the particular problem you've got. Whether it's the library, whether it's Google, whether it's a friend, if it's a spiritual one, maybe the preacher, an elder, someone will be able to help you overcome that problem. Because they're just ordinary problems. One of the problems depressed people have is, this is unique to me. They always feel that this is unique to me. That's one of the things they really struggle with when they get depressed. But that's not the case. God promises us that's not the case. No problem is unique. So we can find the answer anywhere. Notice also that this promise is based on God's faithfulness, not on our ability. That's why I say something in the filtering region must be happening. Because it's based on God's faithfulness, not our ability to cope with any different situation. But what I take from this, if God's not going to allow me to be overwhelmed in any way, then get stuck in. Don't worry about failure. Just get stuck in and do it. You come to a problem, get help. If you have a spiritual crisis, someone will be able to help you. Get stuck in and do it. Don't worry about failure. Fear of failure is the biggest thing that stops people doing it. Okay, the next passage, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Again, a promise that God makes to us. Now, kind of taken that at superficial value, you could say, well, that can't be true. If I get on a balcony on a 10-story building and jump out, they'll be scraping me off the concrete when I get to the bottom. I won't be able to fly. And absolutely, I would agree with that. I don't believe that's what it's talking about. I think what he says is we can do everything we need to ensure that we make it to heaven in a good way. Through Christ, we can accomplish that. Maybe we won't be able to do everything in the journey, like flying or doing some things, but we're going to be able to be successful in the overall journey we're on. We're going to get there in the end because of what Christ is going to do for us. Then the third verse in this part, Romans 8:28. Dee's favourite verse I really love. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Another one I think that relates to overcoming problems and how we relate to problems. And we know that all things, everything, it doesn't say there everything is good. It says everything works together for good. We benefit from bad things that happen to us. Or sometimes something might seem bad, but later on when we get a bit further down the track, we realise how helpful that was in our life. Maybe it's in producing growth, it's learning to accept suffering, learning to handle a different situation. We don't grow when life is easy, we grow when life is difficult. So all things work together for good. Notice who this promise is to. It's not to everybody. I don't believe it's to those outside the church. To those who love God. And then we know if we love God, we'll be serving God. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So I was talking about those who are true Christians. God ensures that everything experienced in some way works towards our good. We may not enjoy it all the time. You know, discipline isn't always good, but the end result of discipline is good. And those who are called according to his purpose. That's us. So the attitude I think we need there is we need to view everything that happens to us, whether it's perceived as good or bad, as something beneficial to us. Because that's what this is saying. Everything works together for good. We've fallen out with a friend. That seems bad. But quite possibly that will give you the opportunity to work towards having an even better relationship with that person if you can sort out what's gone wrong. And then that will give you knowledge in dealing with other people as well. All things work together for good. If we have that attitude in our mind, that's going to make a huge difference to our life. Just that one there. Okay, the second thing I kind of felt was really necessary, and this isn't an exhaustive list by any means. These are some things that really jumped out at me. The second one is turn weakness into strengths. 2 Corinthians 12, starting at verse 7. I've talked about this passage a few times because I really love it. And I think the reason I really love it, I need it. Possibly more than most. Here Paul's talking about his own life, his struggles. Possibly he had eyesight problem or eye problems. Frequently got people to write out his notes for him. Maybe he dictated them. One stage he said, look with what big letters I write my own signature, you know. So the reason you write big letters is you can't see little letters, which I can't. So, and he, you know, talked about the Galatians. They were willing to pluck out their eyes for them. They loved him so much. So probably he was talking about eye problems, which may be somewhat similar to me. I don't know. Don't know what problems he had. It doesn't say. But anyway, he wanted God to help him overcome this eye problem. Probably his thinking was, look, I can be such a better servant in your cause if I don't have this particular problem. And I feel that way most of the time. And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelation, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. That's a pretty good statement on Paul's part. Ask God to help him. God's reply was, I'm not going to help you overcome the problem, but I'm going to help you remain humble. To me, Paul was one of the greatest spiritual leaders of all time. And he could have easily become a very arrogant person. Same with any great speaker. Very easy for them to become arrogant. You look at the American television, the TV preachers on there, you know. And yet this problem Paul after this viewed it as necessary for him to maintain a true spiritual attitude in his life. Now, after verse 8, concerning this thing I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. So God's reply, my grace is sufficient for you. I think there is meaning being willing to rely on the kindness of God was more important, as far as God's concerned as a characteristic, than having perfect health. I often think about my own life, and I hate talking about myself in illustrations, but in this case it's pretty appropriate. When I left high school, I really wanted to be an engineer, like my son fortunately has done. There were some other problems apart from my problems. One is that I never paid attention to maths in class. I've got quite a good maths brain, but I just never bothered to work in maths. I wish I had now, I really did. But the other problem was the eyes weren't up to it. Whether it was the actual mechanical side of it or the reading side, I just Couldn't do it. And I often wonder what would have happened if I had have actually had good enough eyes so that I could have got through engineering and become an engineer, and heaven knows what I would have done, you know. I think quite possibly I would not have been a Christian. I think that's probably fairly likely. At that stage I thought Christianity was a joke. That kind of came from my grandfather. But because of various struggles, I did realise that I couldn't do it on my own. If I hadn't have become a Christian, I would not have been able to go to university like I'd done. I wouldn't have experienced a lot of the things I've experienced in life. And I think one of the big things, which I'm very, very grateful, I probably never would have made D. I could have married a real nasty girl. Who knows? But I ended up marrying an absolutely wonderful Christian lady, and that means everything in the world to me. But I think it became really primarily because of weakness on my part. So verse 9, and he said, my grace is sufficient for you, my kindness towards you in accepting you even though you are not physically perfect is enough for you. I think that's what he's saying here. And Paul said, and then the second part of this, my strength is made perfect in weakness. Now I think that's another part of the overall scenario that needs to be considered. This seems like a contradiction in terms. How can we be strong if we are weak? And he says, strength is perfected, made perfect through weakness. You may remember these couple of stories that at least to me made sense of this passage. One's about a baseball selector, and I know you have used this a few times, so I'll try not to dwell too much on it. But this guy came to I think it was a university, and the group were playing baseball, and the fathers knew that this particular guy was a selector or a recruiter, I'm not sure what you call it, for a professional baseball team. And of course the fathers want to draw the attention of the selector to their sons, and one father said, look at this guy Corky, you know, he's the best player here, you know. Just a natural athlete, really very impressive. Best swing, gets the most runs, etc., etc. He's just a natural athlete. And the selector said, no, not going to choose him. He looked around a bit more. And this father said, well, hang on, do you want people who can't hit a ball? You know, why wouldn't you choose the best natural athlete in the group? Surely he would be the logical one to choose. And the guy said, no, never choose a natural athlete. And the father said, well, could you explain why? And he said, well, what I find is natural athletes have a built-in ceiling. In other words, they have a glass ceiling. Things come so easy to them naturally, they never learn to struggle. So they can get to a certain level very easily, but they never struggle hard enough to break through that level, get into a higher level. So what we want is people who are willing to put in the effort to achieve what they want to achieve as far as athletics and ball playing, etc. is concerned. So the natural athletes almost never do that. You need people who absolutely struggle to achieve what they want. And it's the struggle that the struggle that makes them great. Okay, next little story, and Dee's told me this 5 minutes to go, so unfortunately. There's a guy that wanted to be a professional boxer, and this again is very relevant to what I'm trying to say. He's about my height, about my weight, about the same length of arms. He didn't have particularly long arms, and as an amateur he'd start boxing and okay for a little while, but then he'd get tired and the arms would drop down, and as an amateur I think he got beaten quite a few times. Knocked out the odd time. You know, when he got tired he just couldn't do it. But he really wanted to become a professional boxer. All his friends said, you're crazy, you'll get killed. Professional's way more difficult than the amateur, so just don't bother doing it. But he really wanted to become a professional boxer, so he developed a system of training where he actually went down into a swimming pool and he'd box underwater. You know, the resistance is greater. And for him, apparently he did it for hours on end. Just kept going because he knew he absolutely had to have that real physical fitness if he was going to survive in the ring and if he was going to be able to do what he wanted to do. Believe it or not, that guy coming from someone who physically wasn't a very good boxer at all, retired the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world. Undefeated. His name was Rocky Marciano. He was killed in an airplane, but he did retire the undefeated heavyweight, and that's incredible. And he did it not because he was a natural athlete, and that gives me some hope. He did it not because he was a natural athlete, but because he just had an absolute will that he was going to succeed in what he was doing. To me, those stories are really relevant to us as Christians. If we give up at the first hurdle, if we say, it's too hard, I can't, we won't make it. But if we take the advice of these passages, nothing can overcome us. God will work with us. God will help us. Everything works together for good. And see the value of weakness. We will make it in the end. We will achieve the greatest prize of all time. If we miss out on this one, we've lost everything. But if we gain it, we've gained everything. Now, I might go through the rest of them the next time. There's another lesson after. I haven't quite decided yet. But just to finish off, I want to talk about something called a moso tree, which to me brings this all together. There's this Chinese bamboo, and when the people planted it, they planted it, watered it, weeded it, and after a year there was still nothing there. Second year they come back, they fertilise it, they water it, they weed it, etc. At the end of the second year, still nothing there. Come back, third year the same, fourth year the same, fifth year the same. Man, after the first year I'd say forget that one. But it's either that the sixth year or the seventh year, that tree grows 20 feet in 6 weeks. And I've looked this up, this is true. If they'd quit early on, when there was no sign of growth, they would never have got to that final stage where the growth was absolutely massive. The thing is, what was the thing doing for all that time? What it was doing was putting down roots to strengthen itself so that when it finally did grow, it would be able to support the growth and maturity that it achieved in such a short time. I think that's kind of like us as Christians. A lot of times we don't see the benefits of the work we're putting in to grow. But what we're doing is putting down a foundation in our life to give us strength to when we finally do face difficulties and problems. If that foundation is there and it's strong, then we'll survive anything that hits us. But if we don't build that foundation, we won't. That's how we can learn to fly. By applying these principles in our life and trusting God to be with us as we go on that journey.